Hello everyone, welcome to the McMillan Community Center and Park Project, Subcontractor Contracting and Employment Training. Here you will see a list of the main point of contacts for the McMillan Community Center and Park Project. First we have the Gilbane Building Company, the general contractor for the project, as well as Atmos Solutions, the contracting and employment compliance officer for the project. I will pause for a few moments for you to record any necessary information. I will begin by reviewing the compliance requirements per the Department of Small and Local Business Development, or DSLBD. The Department of Small and Local Business Development is the district agency that monitors both public and private projects and contracts per the DC Official Code. This means that all construction and non-construction government-assisted projects over $250,000 must meet a 35% small business enterprise participation requirement. So what does this mean for subcontractors? Well, when subcontractors are met with contracting opportunities, they must make all efforts to subcontract to SBE and CBE subcontractors. In addition, you will also be required to submit an SBE subcontracting plan that lists all your lower tier subcontractors, especially the SBE and CBE subcontractors. On this slide, you will see the first page of the SBE subcontracting plan. This first page will be pre-filled for you, so there is no need to complete the first page of the SBE subcontracting plan. Here is the second page of the SBE subcontracting plan. There are a few items on this page that you will need to complete. First, your lower tier company's name, their address, telephone number, email address, as well as their tier level in relation to your company. You will also need to provide a description of the work that your lower tier will be performing on site, as well as the total amount of their subcontract. You will see on this second page of the SBE subcontracting plan that there are two boxes for you to report information on your lower tier subcontractors. If you have more than 2 lower tier subcontractors, you will have to make a duplicate of this second page of the SBE subcontracting plan to complete your plan in its entirety. Here's the final page of your SBE subcontracting plan. You will not have to complete any information on this page as it will be completed by DSLBD. For each subcontractor listed on the SBE subcontracting plan, you're required to provide a copy of the fully executed subcontract with each individual company. This is required so that the CBE can be counted towards the 35% SBE subcontracting requirement. All SBE, CBEs companies will also be required to submit a quarterly vendor verification form at each tier. I will go more into detail of what the vendor verification form looks like on the next slide. The vendor verification form is a document that is submitted quarterly and attests to the amount paid to the SBE or CBE within a specific quarter. Here you can see the first page of the vendor verification form. Part 1 of the vendor verification form speaks to the project information. Part 2 speaks to the SBE CBE's company's information, and Part 3 details how that SBE CBE plans on completing its scope of work, whether that be that the company will provide 100% of all services for the entire project, 100% of all services for the entire subcontract, or will subcontract a portion of the contract or subcontract to a lower tier subcontractor. Now you'll see the second page of the vendor verification form, which starts with Part 4. I will now go through each line item and what information is required. The first line is the total amount of the contract or subcontract. The next line speaks to the total amount subcontracted to SBE and CBE lower tier subcontractors. This line is only to be completed if this SBE or CBE subcontractor contracted work out to another SBE and CBE. The next line is how much the SBE or CBE company was paid during the quarter. Following that is the total amount the SBE CBE has been paid to date. And the last line is the remaining amount to be paid out to the SBE CBE. Also on this page, you will see below Part 4, you will need to sign and notarize the vendor verification form. DSLBD imposes a very specific SVE requirement on this project. It's important that all subcontractors participate in outreach efforts in a timely manner so that the DSLBD requirements can be met. Below, you will see a list of outreach activities that could be performed by the subcontractor. At any time, if you need assistance or have any questions or concerns regarding outreach activities, please reach out to Atmos Solutions, the compliance officer for this project. Next, I will provide an overview of the Department of Employment Services, or DOES. DOES is the district agency that monitors the First Source Employment Agreement Act, which was enacted in 1984. DOES is also your first source in recruiting and hiring for new jobs created by government-assisted projects like this one. As previously mentioned, DOES monitors the First Source Employment Agreement. The First Source law requires that all subcontractors with a contract value of $300,000 or more enter into a First Source Employment Agreement. The First Source Employment Agreement, along with the revised employment plan, must be submitted no less than 7 calendar days in advance of the project or contract start date, whichever is later. It's important that the First Source Employment Agreement and revised employment plan are submitted in a timely manner. So what exactly does the First Source Employment Agreement require of a subcontractor? For each subcontractor that has entered into a First Source Employment Agreement, they must have DC residents work a specific number of hours in specific categories. Here on this slide, you can see the percentage of hours that must be worked by DC residents on the project. 20% of journey worker hours must be worked by DC residents. 60% of apprentice hours must be worked by DC residents. 51% of skilled labor hours must be worked by DC residents, and lastly, 70% of common labor hours must be worked by DC residents. At any time, if new employment opportunities arise over the course of the project, they must be listed with DOES first. There are 2 ways to list them with DOES first. First, call the DOES Job Bank Services to get registered, or list all open positions on Job Bank Services DC Network's website. As a subcontractor that has entered a First Source Employment Agreement, you will be required to submit a revised First Source Employment Plan. The revised First Source Employment Plan details the projections of how many hours will be worked by DC residents in the previously discussed categories, as well as a hiring plan. There will also be an opportunity on the revised First Source Employment Plan to disclose why you will not be having any new hires for the project. While you do not have to employ work in all categories, any that you do use must meet the percentage requirements for DC hours. Please note that failure to meet these requirements will result in a monetary fine. And I also want to reiterate again that any job openings on the project must be submitted to DOES before advertising the job. This will give DOES at least 5 business days to identify and refer any candidates. DOES monitors the subcontractor's compliance with their First Source Employment Agreement through the DC Workforce Statistics Report. This report is generated from certified payrolls that are submitted into the LCP Tracker system. We also send out a monthly DC Workforce Statistics update so that the subcontractor is aware of where they stand with their DC hours that are worked in the journeyman, apprentice, skilled labor, and common labor categories. Please note that DOES can perform audits at any time where the subcontractor may be asked to provide payroll and employment records. If a subcontractor were to breach the requirements of a First Source Employment Agreement, they may be met with monetary fines up to 5% of the total amount of direct and indirect labor costs. Additionally, failure to meet the required hiring requirements or failure to receive good faith waiver may also result in monetary fines of 1/8 of 1% of the total amount of direct and indirect labor costs. In regards to the DC Apprenticeship Council, subcontractors with contracts that exceed $500,000 within a 12-month period in the District of Columbia must register an apprenticeship program with the DC Apprenticeship Council. There are a few requirements of subcontractors that have an apprenticeship program. Subcontractors with an apprenticeship program must have a minimum numerical ratio of 1 to 3. That means that for every one apprentice that is on site, you must have 3 journey workers employed on site at any time. These subcontractors will also have to meet a 35% requirement of DC apprentice hours. On this slide is an example of the DC Workforce Statistics report that will be sent to subcontractors who have entered into a first source employment agreement. This example shows ABC Corporation, and they have been deemed non-compliant in the skilled labor category as well as the unskilled labor category. Although they are compliant in the journey worker and apprentice category, they are not in compliance with the first source regulation as they are mandated by law to meet the requirement for any classification that is utilized on the project. Now we will move on to discussing the compliance requirements for the Department of Labor, or DOL. The Davis-Bacon Act of 1931 falls under the monitoring requirements of the Department of Labor. The Davis-Bacon Act is to prevent non-local contractors from obtaining federal construction contracts by underbidding local wage levels. The Davis-Bacon Act requires that subcontractors adhere to the locally prevailing wages, and they must also be included in the bid specifications. The Davis-Bacon Act applies to any federal government and District of Columbia contract that exceeds $2,000. Another requirement of the Davis-Bacon Act is that contractors and subcontractors must pay all mechanics and laborers employed directly on the site of work and not less often than once a week. All projects that fall under the Davis-Bacon Act of 1931 must have a project wage determination. The project wage determination speaks to how much an employee must be paid on site when performing work. All employees must be paid in accordance with the wage determination for the project. If you do not have a copy of the wage determination, please reach out to Atmos Solutions and we will be more than happy to provide you with one. If you notice that there are classifications needed on the wage determination, you must complete a DOL Conformance Request SF-1444 form. Atmos will assist with the SF-1444 form as needed. For the project, you will also have to submit certified payroll in the LCP tracker system. All payroll reports must be consecutively numbered starting at 1, and you must submit a payroll report indicating no work performed for those weeks when your company is not on site. Lastly, you must submit certified payroll reports until the work for your company is completed. Fringe benefits are a requirement of the project wage determination. The wage determination requires that employees performing work on site must be paid a fringe benefit rate for each hour worked if the company does not provide bona fide fringe benefits. Please see on the screen some examples of bona fide fringe benefits. Please note that payroll tax or any other deductions are not included in fringe benefits. As a part of your certified payroll report that you will be submitting on a weekly basis, you must complete a statement of compliance. The statement of compliance certifies that the contractor and subcontractor has paid the required wages per the project wage determination. This statement of compliance must be signed by the person who pays the employees or the person supervising payment of the employees. Upon the submission of certified payroll, the Department of Labor has the right to conduct an audit at will of all your certified payroll records. Atmos Solutions also performs field audits, where we conduct Department of Labor interviews to ensure that workers are being paid according to the project wage determination. You're required to maintain certified payroll records for 3 years after the project's completion. Any falsification of certified payroll records is a criminal violation and can result in one of the following: a fine, up to 5 years in prison or both, grounds for a private lawsuit under the False Claims Act. It can also result in debarment. Now I want to take a moment to discuss the relationship between the project wage determination and the District of Columbia living wage. The District of Columbia's living wage increases biannually. If the DC living wage is higher than the rate on the wage determination, it supersedes the rate that is projected on the wage determination. Let's look at the below example to further explain. So if a subcontractor were to pay their common laborer a total of $15.84 with a base rate of $13 and fringes of $2.84, they would owe restitution because at the time the DC living wage was $16.10. The $16.10, the DC living wage rate, supersedes the $13 that is listed on the project wage determination. The correct rate owed to common laborers would be $18.94. That concludes the McMillan Community Center and Park Project Subcontractor, Contracting, and Employment Training. Thank you for joining us.